So thanks so much for joining me, Nick. I've long been a fan of what you have accomplished and built at TechChange. And I want to start early on with your journey because, like we talked a little bit earlier, your path has been super unique in my opinion. And I kind of want to start with the master's degree in peace education and then how that path goes to being sort of a tech social entrepreneur. So let's start there.
Grant, great to be here. Excited to be on the podcast, and just a big fan of yours and the community you've curated over many years. So I did that peace education degree on the heels of a modern poetry degree. So really, I was doubling down on all things practical, all things job ready and relevant. That chapter was a really important one in my journey because I really took a leap of faith. I said, all right, I want to do this 1-year master's in Costa Rica at this United Nations University for Peace. But I really want to study how education is working internationally. I want to understand this market beyond just the United States. And I had this tremendous experience working with 13 other educators from around the world as part of a community of 200 peacemakers, civil servants, entrepreneurs, really just incredible humans who were committed to social change. My mind expanded in so many ways being part of that graduate school experience. Just had a really hard time afterwards figuring out what a job actually looks like.
When you do that, do you move then from Costa Rica or do you stay there for a while? Do you have sort of the tech sort of ingredients in your body at that point? Are you sort of on the side, kind of just working in the tech field, maybe just developing skills there? How does the sort of tech side come into your life? Because that's
Yeah.
obviously a pivotal sort of point.
So it's interesting, Grant. I had actually studied some computer science in high school. I had built websites
Mhm.
late in the 1990s. Did a senior project for high school, so I'd had some tech. Interestingly, my father was responsible for helping bring email servers and services to the White
Wow.
House. That was his claim to fame. So we'd had it, obviously in the family, had been a very techy family. But coming out of that grad school experience, I came back to Washington, D.C. I started applying for jobs. I could not get a job anywhere. I was looking for things in peace and conflict studies, which is already a pretty
Sure.
niche field. I was looking for just anything I could find in international development. That became quite challenging. While I was doing that, I also decided, well, maybe I'll help the university that I just graduated from with their fundraising, student recruitment. So I started a little nonprofit for them on the side. And then I had to, lo and behold, build a website for them and
Yeah.
actually think about the digital marketing and services that could be used to support that effort. And so as I was running that, I was learning a bit about the tech, and then I just started to team up with folks in Washington D.C., other nerds who were really excited about the fact that 30% of the world had access to internet.
Yeah.
90% of people globally had some kind of access to a mobile device. And we started to look at some of these macro global trends and say, wait a minute, like what is the kind of tech for good angle?
Yeah.
And sure enough, we started to, in the year leading up to TechChange, kind of the creation of TechChange, we saw the Arab Spring and social media being used to track human rights abuses. We saw digital maps being
Yep.
used in Haiti to triage response. So already we were starting to collect these really powerful examples of technology, not just being used to make phone calls and connect to the internet, but to actually do something good for the world.
Yeah, and it gave the one thing, and we'll kind of get into the origins of tech change and what that looked like in the beginning, because I remember it being the most incredible coursework that I had saw to date, dealing with looking at interesting ways to use, social impact, right? Because early 2000s or 2010s, I mean, there really wasn't anything at a university that was sort of looking at technology and what you said, sort of the advancement in the internet and putting that to social impact and bringing those together and figure out how can we take people who want to impact the world, but like technology and maybe want to even learn more about it because they see the impact of digital mapping of mobile payments across Africa. And I remember looking at the courses, and I actually took the mapping one
Nice.
and actually went to Haiti, and then it was a very I really just remember sort of I was like, this is incredible, right? Like the teachers and the lecturers and people from around the world in the course, right? That was which was so powerful. Before too, I was like, there's no way you could get this at a university. But then I thought I was like, why not? why can't you get
Right.
this at a
Why
university?
not?
Like, this
Why
is the
not?
type of stuff that I think students, especially coming out of high school or coming out of a master's degree, they need this sort of segue, right? Like for you, if you came out, it sounds like you probably would have took a tech change course because
Be right.
it would have hooked you up with the people you could have went and worked for, right? Also, it's this sort of career path
100%.
that it built out too. So just that's a long-winded way of saying thank you for building what you did, because it definitely inspired me and it impacted my life a bit, and I'm sure it's impacted many more. But take us
Oh, that's
back
amazing.
to starting the company, and did you have to raise
Yeah.
money? Did you have to get friends who were developers to help you build it? So just take us to the path of
Yeah.
actually building the company.
Yeah. So back to that group of nerds, Grant,
Yes.
we kind of said, what if we kind of looked at the landscape and we said, no one's really applying the latest online learning technologies, pedagogies to address this market of people who want to learn about tech for good and want to
Yeah.
build skills. And so we actually
Yeah.
took hundreds of courses at that time. And so this was pre Coursera, this was pre edX.
Right.
This was the era of Phoenix University.
Mm-hmm.
This was, really early days, but we really said, all right, to do this right, we should really look at everything that's out there and try and build not just a model to deliver this great content, right? Whatever these case studies and examples of things like you mentioned, digital mapping, mobile payments, but also rethink the way that the content is delivered. And so to do that, we built our own platform to do that, which
Mm-hmm.
was in hindsight pretty crazy
Yeah, it's
because
so difficult to do, even
we
now.
were we were bootstrapped. We were
Yeah.
absolutely bootstrapped. No one's going to fund a social enterprise from a VC perspective. Certainly had a little bit of savings that I used, but this was also height of the recession, and so a
Mm-hmm.
lot of my colleagues, they also couldn't get jobs easily, right? So these early contributors to TechChange were just really excited about this vision. And kind of to tie in one more point that you mentioned, we were early days. We were really excited and kind of assumed that the market for our courses was going to be grad students. We thought
Mm-hmm.
people that would either instead of grad school or in addition to grad school would be our primary market. We certainly did tap into that, but I can say confidently 12 years later that we were profoundly wrong about that. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, Grant, as these universities are going through this latest upheaval
Mm-hmm.
now.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone who teaches at Columbia and Georgetown as an
Yeah.
adjunct, I underestimated profoundly the power of these brands. And I
Mm-hmm.
underestimated the power that they have to endure their own models of delivery, which in my mind are pretty average. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that the educational experience at a lot, even the highest universities,
Yeah.
is that great. And I think we're seeing that play out in real time. But just to say, with those early days, we really said, okay, we've taken these courses now. We're gonna build our own courses. We're gonna build our own platform. We're gonna start marketing and kind of see what happens. And that's what we did. And we launched 3 courses in 2011. And I think the topics were mobile phones for international development, technology for international crisis response or something like that, and then the third one was like innovations in global community building, kind of more like a social media
Yep.
and governance angle, and it worked. We had, we charged $250 a seat. We had probably 40 people sign up for each course. They were all a couple weeks long, and we had this crazy sprint to then build the actual platform that I told my still CTO 10 years later, we're still working. Will, I said, Will, we got to build this thing. You got 3 months, we got paying students, and we've now proved the market. Now we got to build the delivery mechanism. So a kind of exciting time, Grant, but also just a time that, so a-traditional in the kind of arc of how most kind of venture-backed companies deliver their products and services. But in hindsight, honestly, it kept us very attentive and responsive to our market, and I think that really made a huge difference in those early days. Back
And
to you.
just to give an idea of what students joined, if you can give us an idea of just like how many students actually took the courses, and I think it was almost 200 countries, people took these courses from. I just, when you kind of look back on it, that has to be pretty gratifying.
It's incredible, Grant. I mean, in those early days, we also taught one of the first online courses in Sudan.
Hmm.
We had
Amazing.
students from all over, places that, and again, this is really one of the most gratifying things about this work is that hearing from students that they would never have had the opportunity to learn these things, the amount of effort that they would make individually to go and top up their data on their phones to log into
Hmm.
courses, right? Just incredible. But it goes to show you that talent is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not, right? That's a
Hmm.
kind of famous line. I just feel like trying to really unpack that graduate school experience, the things I was teaching in my grad classes, like there's no reason why I couldn't take this to the world. And that, of course, was exactly what a lot of the MOOC models were built on, this decentralization of access. Now, I personally feel like that was a bit of a failed experiment because the actual pedagogical approaches were underwhelming. But what it did do was it did provide this platform of access. And we were early on in that. We were kind of 3 years
Yeah.
before the MOOC movement. So, maybe, to me, that's just exciting to think about democratization of education and our part in helping to encourage it.
I remember y'all had a blockchain course
Yeah.
years before it was cool, right? Years before it was good
Years
to know.
before Nick invested a ton of money into Bitcoin in 2017, lost a lot of money, made some money, but then thought, why don't I teach a course on this? But
Yeah.
really trying to sort of separate the money making crypto side with the potential of this technology for
Yeah.
international development. And look, I think there are a lot of people that are in our sector that are always resistant to some of these new technologies, machine learning, drones, and blockchain, of course. But I think our position has always been, how do we convene communities around learning objectives and actually stress test and really deepen our collective understanding about their real potentials. And we do that with case studies. We do that with tough conversations with experts. It's a really practical and applied learning approach. And again, like that's just not that common. We're not that good at sharing and collaborating across the nonprofit sector. So for us, we're this kind of small but nimble social enterprise that connects dots between huge organizations around learning. And it's important because there's so much competition in nonprofits because there's scarcity of resources. And we really are trying to kind of destabilize some of that and center the conversations around collaboration, because we can't get these things addressed or solved without everybody working together, right? And I think we're feeling that pain extra in an intense sense right now with this pandemic.
I wanted to go back to something you referenced before about your side gig sort of being a professor at a few different universities. What is it like being in that environment now? Do the universities sort of tap your insight and how they can sort of modernize their education platform, and look at ways to, obviously now that people are still paying 30 grand a year to take online classes at universities,
Yeah.
where it seems to be that can't be sustainable, right?
Yeah.
Has there been, still to this day, has there still been any innovation in how they can make the traditional coursework or how people learn in colleges a little different, where it's more than just paying 30 grand a year for just basically going to get a social life, right? It seems like what it's to at this point.
Oh, and a credential grant, and
Yeah, yeah.
that's really where this comes down. And I think this is what it's become. These big universities are minting credentials,
Hmm.
and look, there's some great professors doing amazing work across a lot of these schools. I think what's challenging is that institutionally they have become victims of their own brand. They
Hmm.
don't
Hmm.
innovate because there is no incentive or pressure to innovate. A lot of them are still using Blackboard, Moodle,
So crazy. Yeah.
and that's just there's many reasons for this. I think again there are many well-intentioned administrators, but
Sure.
there are probably too much. The administration as a whole is too big.
Hmm.
I think the promise of online learning was so great and remains so great. And to see, I'm just so disappointed to see New York Times article after New York Times article over the summer from various university presidents saying, we tried Zoom, it didn't work. Online learning is a failure. We
Hmm.
need to get back to campus and spend, tens of millions of dollars outfitting our campus for health protocols. And I'm just thinking, like, you're blaming the medium, but you had 20 years to figure out how
Yeah,
to
exactly.
make. Let's be honest, your business
Hmm.
model fundamentally goes against what online learning provides as far as potential, right? Harvard and Columbia and some of these other schools that I've taught at have not increased their incoming classes for undergraduates, right? They've kind of kept those numbers around the same. Where I went to school, Swarthmore, prides itself on liberal arts education. Again, all great schools in some respects, but not pushing the fringe of online learning and innovation. And it's a shame. I
Yeah.
really do think there's so much more we could be doing. Coursera had this kind of grand vision to take a
Hmm.
lot of the kind of aspects of the higher ed experience and democratize it, but schools were very nervous about having it cut into their revenue streams. 2U is another one that's sort of going program by program and sort of doing all the marketing and the enrollment and the course building. And there's some great courses out there that they're building online, but it's I think the quality is all over the map, and I don't think we're anywhere near where we could be with the potential for online learning because of how schools have chosen to monetize this. It's a shame because not everybody's going to get to go to Harvard. It's
Yeah.
going to get more competitive, and we have to stop. I think as a consumer sector, we're so seduced by these brands. They've got us. These are the strongest
Well,
brands in the world.
on the flip side, though, also the companies, I think, need to stop it on their end, giving their energy and their hiring practices to those brands,
For
right?
sure. That's huge.
Because talent, like you said, it's all about minting that certificate, right? And that is sort of the gateway to traditionally been the gateway, to getting those jobs. So I think it's partly on these companies to look at their hiring practices and say, hey, we have to
100%.
think outside the box too. And it's unfortunate, like you said, because they had such a massive head start,
Yeah.
because being brands and being institutions, they were trusted, right? They could have did this innovation and people, I think, would have gave them a decade long to figure it out, right? Even invest money in it and make the mistakes.
Totally.
And then at
Totally.
this point, you could have been, I don't know. I just think there's a lot. I just think I look at as a weird parallel, looking at like all the oil companies, right? And it's like
Yeah.
you had 20 years to innovate and start looking at climate change and actually being a change and innovating and investing. Now
Yeah.
all these big funds and all these big investors are taking their money out of those and putting it in these clean tech businesses. I'm like, Chevron and Exxon, you could have been the clean tech companies,
Yeah.
right? It was like it's such a missed opportunity. It's so unfortunate,
But they're going to be fine, Grant. That's the crazy thing is that give every
yeah,
market
yeah,
indicator I can see is that the schools that are in trouble are the second tier
of course, right,
schools, the state schools.
yeah,
I'm personally very excited about the community college online learning vector and
mm,
that ability to provide really high quality online learning. But I mean, the good news, the silver lining here is that I think we have advanced or accelerated probably about a decade worth of online learning innovation in the past 10 months.
wild, yeah,
And the schools that figure this out and that are able to adapt and absorb that acceleration curve are going to do awesome, and the ones that aren't are probably not going to make it. The brands, unfortunately, are going to learn all the wrong lessons from this, most likely, and continue to be fine. And that's I think we all have to just operate in the shadow of that reality. But there's just a ton of innovation still to be had, and we might see Google and Facebook and others start universities, right? I think that getting back to your
totally
hiring,
possible.
I think a lot of hiring managers are totally seduced with hiring people who had the same journey they did,
Mm,
and they all went to good schools, but they have fundamentally misread or refused to accept the reality that now it is a lot harder to pay for those schools, it's a
yeah,
lot harder to go to those schools, and that there are many talented people who have non-traditional paths. So
it's a good
lots to think about there.
it's a good segue into what tech change is now, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of been, through your social entrepreneurship journey. I wouldn't say it's a major like pivot or segue, but I think you looked at the market and again, you were early on, just like your coursework, just like everything you've done. You were so early on into looking at the landscape of where things were going and started producing these events and producing this coursework, producing this platform for others, essentially, white labeling the TechChange platform in a way, which is so smart. So take us up to date now on what TechChange is and why you saw the reason to make that shift.
Grant, it's a great question. We probably around 2015, 2016 noticed that we were hitting some natural ceilings with our B2C, our business to consumer products. Those were the courses.
Hmm.
We launched this diploma program. So we were trying to figure out, could we string together courses, raise the price point, even offer an alternative grad degree?
Yeah.
And we were really excited about that. We had $1,000 for a diploma program for 3 courses, kind of a semester long experience, and a $5,000 a semester kind of more involved alternative graduate degree experience. And we sold it. I mean, we probably sold around 100, 150 seats in the $1,000 one, and 5 or 6 in the alternative grad
Hmm.
school. And
Hmm.
I think we were so early with that market that
Yeah.
we maybe learned some of the wrong lessons, but we started to, obviously with those numbers, that's not enough to really sustain a business line. And so we said, meanwhile, there were tons of organizations in the social sector coming to us saying, hey, you know what, we kind of need help taking our content online. What can you do? So in those early days, we were building a lot, and some of the standard e-learning tools, building slide-based courses, really stunning ones, like almost like watching a documentary or a movie, but going
Hmm.
through a slide,
Hmm.
game-like experience, really stunning. We hired graphics teams and motion animators, and they were beautiful courses. They were not great. It was not a great business
Yeah.
because it was very complicated to produce these.
Yeah.
This software we were using, if one thing is wrong in any one of
Yeah.
these 100 slides, you got to go back and change it, maintain
Yeah.
it. So we sort of said, all right, well, let's white label our platform, and that's actually use the platform as the organizing principle for building courses. And that really changed a lot. It basically opened us up to all kinds of business lines, doing workshops and synchronous learning more than just self-paced courses. So
Hmm.
most organizations early days were coming to us, say, hey, can you take this compliance course, and can you turn it into a slide-based course? Then they started saying, wait a minute, we could actually train audiences in the field with this
Yeah.
TechChange software as part of a capacity building project. So suddenly, well, light bulbs going off. And then we started to just do a lot more USAID work. We started to kind of find a niche in the last 2 or 3 years in public health.
Mm.
And it is kind of funny that even before the pandemic, we were being asked to kind of come full circle and do a lot more in-person training. And so I was flying around the world building highly interactive in-person workshops, being like, what am I doing? and it's interesting, Grant. Like even up until last, I will say, kind of a year ago, because we're kind of still
Yeah.
pre-pandemic here. A year ago, I was still traveling. I was thinking to myself, this sector is just not going to get it. They're not.
Mm.
Like I have a nice amount of work. I can, but to like continue to maintain the product, the platform itself, to white
Hmm.
label it in a tech team, it's very expensive.
Very expensive.
I'm still bootstrapped. Just was feeling like the model couldn't work because people were just not that receptive. Everybody in this sector wants to be in person with their training so badly for all
Hmm.
kinds of reasons, per diems, international development. And we love traveling, right?
Sure.
Getting on planes and doing stuff. But then the pandemic just changed everything.
Yeah.
And I'll stop
Yeah.
there and I'll let you reflect on this.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's kind of where I was going, unfortunately, and I think it's, obviously there's so much displacement, I think, economically and mentally as well, and I don't think we sort of see the effects of mental health that's going to come after this. I do think that is that could be something that has been sort of really unforeseen, and just like the pandemic is harming bodies physically, I think it's going to do similar effects to our mental capacity in some areas of the world. So, but with that said, you kind of get this shift in mentality, right? This shift in how do you think about your organization? How do you think about your business? How do they still survive, right? I guess when that happens, right? And you sort of, I guess maybe March 2020, March, April, May, that time, does that when things start to get a little crazy where people start to call and be like, hey, we need to like ramp up everything because this is our entire company now, is that, are dependent on TechChange now building this like in rapid time, right? I'm sure everything needed to be done next day, right? So I guess what was those early stages of the pandemic like being a tech company, right? When everybody is flocking to sort of online and virtual at that point.
Yeah, so many emotions and feelings there, and I'll maybe just start this answer with a quote from a professor, a colleague of mine who teaches at Harvard and who's also involved in online learning efforts. And he said to me probably sometime in mid 2019, he said, Nick, you got a great business, you got an interesting model.
Hmm.
All you have to do is survive long enough to take advantage of the next
Mm.
big wave of ed tech innovation.
Hmm.
Someone is going to figure this model out
Hmm.
in a big way, but there are going to be tons of winners in this sector. And, wow, I think he was thinking we were on kind of a 5-10 year journey. And frankly, we probably were. And I'd already been
Yeah.
on a 5-10 year journey.
Yeah.
So, but so prescient, right? So to be able to say that, like, look, this is an inevitable tide. We are going to have to figure out online learning. There are too many people to educate. People are too distributed. The power of the internet and the democratization of information is too important to trend to ignore.
Hmm.
And in a sense, like with the pandemic, it catalyzed and accelerated that reality. In the early days, amazingly, I was actually quite sick, and I thought I might actually have COVID this
Oh.
time last
Hmm.
year. And I was, bedridden. It turned out to be just the flu. Freaked out, scared,
Mm.
terrified, in a small bedroom with my newly married wife, and just like hating life.
Yeah.
But as I started to kind of recover from that and realize just what this meant, I had clients, in those early days just kind of started to cancel trips. We were supposed to go to Sierra Leone
Hmm.
as an organization and do a training for the Ministry of Health, and that
Wow.
was canceled at the last minute. I had probably 6 or 7 international trips that one by one started to be canceled. And slowly the clients started to ask, well, what can we do here? And I kept saying, well, we are an online learning company first and foremost. We can take this online. But even then, I think for us, it pushed us, right? Because we had to sort of say, we're going to take a Zoom playbook. We're going to marry it with our platform. We're going to really think about how to design and use some of these whiteboard tools that are out there, marrying our tech, our experience
Hmm.
with really having to go fully synchronous. And there was, I think, in March, an opportunity for us to take a workshop with PEPFAR, which is the largest public health program in the world. We were going to do this workshop in person for them in DC. And my colleague, who's very senior at PEPFAR, was kind of like, Nick, what can we do here?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I said, Mark, we should do this entirely online. Like, don't cancel it. Let's do a day and a half, 6 hours, 4 hours. We'll design an agenda and we'll do this whole thing online. And trust me, I can pull
Hmm.
this off.
Hmm.
And we did, and it was amazing. And we had sort of very senior people, and of course PEPFAR working on COVID stuff as well.
Sure.
Days, and Deborah Burks was, obviously Dr. Burks was in charge of PEPFAR, but our little workshop made it to the highest echelons of this program, saying like, this is the future. And sure enough, kind of client by client started to call up and say, we need to take this online. We need to take this online. And we said, okay. And we worked with our existing clients, started to sort of phone started ringing for other engagements. But granted, it was really the online events business line that we started
Mhm.
that really changed things. And I'm
So
happy to talk more about
yeah,
that.
explain what that is, because I think we can say online event, and you can ask 100 people what that means and what that looks like, and you probably get a different opinion, right? It's that sort of unique to everybody in their sort of experience. So how did you try to make that not necessarily different, but just worth it for people, right, to attend? Because I think we've all sort of attended an online thing, and it's sort of never what we think it's going to be, or
Yeah,
it's just clunky, and somebody's Wi-Fi doesn't work, right, and all these people are in video, or the audio doesn't work. There's a lot of bumps in the road, a lot of hurdles that
totally,
could happen, right?
totally.
And I think what was so great about your organization, your company, is that you were ready for the moment that you always thought would come or wanted to come, right? And when that moment came, you guys were prepared, right? You're like, this is what we've been waiting for the last 10 years, right?
10 years, Grant. That's a long
And I think I know, and I think
time.
sometimes people and founders and they want something to happen. They see the moment where it's going to happen, and then it does happen, and they're not ready for it, and then they can't complete what their clients want, and then they just go to a competitor, right? And then you're done, right? And it's so quick how it could happen, right? So I just thought it was it's a great just moment where I just want to reiterate the point you made is that it's be prepared. Those years that it's not happening for you, like, but if you put in the time, put in the effort to where when that time comes that you always thought would come, if you're prepared, then it's game over, right? Then you have a company for the next 100 years. Sorry about that long-winded.
No,
So
no,
I just
it's
wanted to touch on that a little bit, though.
it, in hindsight, it looks like a genius thing. I can tell you there was so much anxiety, so much fear, so much uncertainty wrapped up in that survival. There was
Hmm.
so much that I had to continue to tell myself this was worth it, and I had to, again, I'm supporting a tech team. I'm
Yeah.
building. I've got 10, 15 staff. It's not just me, right? So I am that anxiety is tremendous. There were times, I took myself off payroll
Oh,
over
yeah.
the years when things didn't work. We clients and projects weren't on time. So I look back and I'm like, man, that was nuts. But I think it's an entrepreneur for me. I had to do this, right? Something deep in my bones said I want to have the impact I want to have on the world is one where I have a team of people and I'm helping to, implement a vision, but I'm really sharing that seat at the table with the team that I trust to help take me there. And if I look back, in those early days of the pandemic, I pushed hard, but really they rose to the challenge. And my team,
Yeah.
and I, I guess you could say, we hired some great people for sure, and but wow, did they step up? And I think that was part due to the fact that they really, everyone was scared and obviously still is, but the issues and the topics and the communities we were working with needed us.
Mm.
And so, I really, a lot of this centered around this first conference that we ran, online conference called the Global Digital Development Forum. And we basically sometime around mid-March, end of March, I got a call from a colleague and he'd said, Nick, every technology and development conference has been canceled.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
what, can we, and he'd been involved obviously in planning conferences in the past and worked together on a number of things. So can TechChange step up here and can we pull together in some crazy timeline, like 5-6 weeks, an online conference for the community, because people are scared, people are suffering, people are have no platform to exchange and collaborate.
Right.
And again, up until this point, remember, we had been an online learning and training company that did some of this, but to do it in the context of a conference,
Right.
with 300 sessions, keynotes, production,
Crazy.
plus so this was all a stretch, and this was really where my team rose to the challenge. We looked at this and we said, it's possible, but
Hmm.
it's going to be a Herculean sprint to pull this off, and they did. I mean, we built an agenda page and a service that sort of really tied together the different sessions. We found a producer, to help us use kind of this higher end broadcast software that is used to produce keynotes. We trained our staff in how to manage and moderate sessions. We got a ton of volunteers in the mix. We had this amazing co-organizing committee with organizations like Save the Children, UN Foundation Dial, Chemonics,
Wow.
IntraHealth. So we had just a phenomenal group, and then getting to that May 5th event was just magical. Like, we did it. We
That's
pulled it
great.
off. Everything kind of worked,
Sure.
but it worked so much better than anything else, right? We weren't just
Yeah.
doing a stream conference. We were really on our platform. We built a 3D environment. We had and this really cool software called Mozilla Hubs. We were delivering all these cool workshops. We had figured out how to do the live streaming. We had people on our platform kind of connecting and exchanging point system for
Mm.
tracking people's progress. So it was so far beyond what anybody else was doing at that point, and I still believe is, because we've kept up, that I think the feedback from that was so incredible and the referrals from that were so abundant
I even imagine.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody at that point, Grant, the phone was really ringing off the hook for this new thing.
And the one thing that is really interesting is that you've kind of become, because it's not just providing the software, right? Which is what most companies do. They say, hey, here's beautiful software. You can run your event. Well, it's one thing to just have the software, right? But then you got to know how to use it, right? Then you got to build the agenda, right? Then you got to, it's no different than a physical event, right? It's just there's an added layer on top of like having the technology, which in a lot of times can make things easier, but sometimes it can make things harder for a little bit
Oh yeah.
until you understand how to use it.
Oh yeah.
But
Oh
you
yeah.
guys kind of do everything, right? And it's you are essentially an event organizer and facilitator. And I think that's sort of the difference in why I think this model has so potential, because it's like, here's what we want to do. And then
Right.
you become the production staff essentially, right? And the organize that is
That's
uh,
exactly it.
so crazy.
Yeah. It's a ton of work, Graham. But you know
Yeah,
what we found is that there are a lot of clients, especially in the social sector, that are not really able to or excited
sure.
about downloading an off the
Uh,
shelf software and sort of
mhm,
running with this enormous amount of work. There's a lot of uncertainty about how to actually pull these off.
definitely.
Um, and I think the other thing about, yes, we do this kind of platform plus production plus support for our model, but we're also just integrating with all kinds of other cool technologies. A lot of
Mm,
times when you go with one of
yep.
these software companies, you're kind of in their ecosystem and you're at the mercy of whatever, and they're fine. They've got a place to get you what you need, but for the real innovation, and we feel for the real kind of networking and kind of collaboration to happen, we got to be able to pull in some of the best tech that's some of that's ours, but some of that's others,
Yep.
and try stuff out and integrate,
Yep.
and that's hard to do if you're just an event planner who's used to doing stuff in person.
100%.
So much tech involved in that piece. So I think that value proposition was really strong, and that product market fit continues to be one of the best we've seen in our 10-year journey. Is just people needing this full service experience to pull off their online events. And the last thing I'll say here, Grant, is I'm really interested to see where this market goes, but I'll tell you,
Yeah.
like, for our sector, we've had conferences where 60-70% of people have come from Global South.
Wow.
And I don't know how this sector goes back to a 5% participation from low to middle income countries in Global South when that conference is in DC or New
Sure.
York
Sure.
or California. So to me, this inclusion narrative is incredible. The carbon, narrative is incredible.
Yeah.
We're not traveling, cost savings, accessibility. There's just so much here that I think we can't just. I mean, yes, we're hungry to see each other again, but maybe there's a model that's hybrid that we're excited about
That
too. But
was that was my next question. Was this time next year, right? Is the client base still there, right? You think it's still as sort of hot and in demand as it is now? I agree with you. I think that there is a hybrid model that is 70% more online and just 30% like physical or something like that, where I think it's here to stay. But love to get your thoughts on, because obviously you're in it every day and you hear
yeah,
sentiments from clients and conferences in general. What do they say sort of long term?
well, a couple trends I'm excited about. I do think our model has always been taking the learning and training secret sauce that we've had for 10 years and really bringing that to the conference and convening experience. And I think that spectrum or that convergence of a conference as a learning and training experience is really exciting to me. I think that's really what we need to be driving at. How that works in terms of format, I think will take all types of shapes and sizes. I've had certainly a lot of clients tell me, even if they could go back to in person, they love this format. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really exciting. I think there are others who are eager to get back in person for some things. I'm personally quite excited about the possibility of what I'm calling the flipped conference model,
Hmm.
where we use the in-person experience to really be highly interactive, highly
Mm-hmm.
engaging, focused on things like networking and community building and working groups, and then the production and the speakers and a lot of the stuff that we can do more flexibly can then be taken online. I think those kind of I think we'll see more kind of local meetups and regional convenings that feed into some kind of global virtual experience. I think that will become more common. Again, I think a lot of people that go to conferences like to hang out in the hallways. They like to meet other
Mm-hmm.
people. They like to go to generate leads. Seeing a famous person up on the stage is kind of, it's nice, but it's maybe not the biggest draw. So
Mm-hmm.
we are working very hard to recreate that hallway experience online. I think we have some really exciting models for that. But I think that, again, I think this kind of regional hub model may be how hybrid settles. But again, we've got some very cool production ideas as well. There's lots of things we can do with green screens and virtual setups. This tech's only going to get better. So
Yep.
I think we will be certainly having virtual conferencing as part of our lives going forward, but it's going to have to get better and better. It can't suck.
Yeah,
And
no doubt.
and it can't just happen on Zoom. Like I really believe that. Like I think Zoom's been an incredible
Hmm.
tool to convene. Just historic proportions that they've had in our lives this past year. But with anything, there's fatigue, there's a
Sure.
frustration with doing it too much, and I think that kind of craving of newness and connection will likely be facilitated by other technologies and models, or at the very least will be kind of in addition to what Zoom brings to the table.
Amazing. Well, I'm gonna end it there. Like, thank you again so much. This it's been a decade in the making. Really, it feels like. Well, not a decade. I was started in 2013 was Cause Artist, and you guys were a little before that. But I remember so early on, man, seeing it and being inspired. So I'm so glad that it looks like your vision became a reality in a lot of different ways. And like I said, I can't wait for the next decade. I think there's going to be so many interesting things that that hard work and resilience is paying off. And I think there's just so much innovation still left in sort of the tech impact space. I think we're still so early on that hope to have you back on maybe next year or something, and see where things are at. But again, thank you for what you built and being resilient, and best of luck the rest of this year and many more years after that, my man. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much, Grant, and really appreciate it. A lot of work to be done, so no rest over here for us. But again, thank you for all you do for the community and highlighting so many incredible social entrepreneurs. And congrats on your 8 year run.